Hello people, welcome to Feisty Chess. I've been paired as black against Qf3 Jr. E4. Let's do E5 this time. We'll come up with something different maybe next time we meet E4. Okay, knight C6. Still lots of opening possibilities. And let's go for a two knights defense. I'm hoping for knight G5. I love a feisty two knights defense. D3 is the main alternative. Okay, here we go. D5 is the main move. Black gives up a pawn in these lines to protect F7. And I've got some specialty lines that aren't the main line, but I think I'll go for the main line today because I've been reading up on that on Chessable. Okay, CJ is taking his time here. Knight A5 is the main line, inviting the bishop to check on B5. So White is able to keep his extra pawn for the time being, but he needs to move, well, he probably needs to move that bishop. The other alternative was queen F3 to pin that pawn to this rook. He goes bishop to E2. Okay, the lines I'm familiar with. Do I go H6 immediately or bishop C5? I think H6 immediately is good here. The knight will probably go back to F3. If H3, I can grab it. Well, if he goes to H3, I don't need to take it because he has nowhere to go in the meantime. Okay. Now I think the immediate E4 is good. Yeah, knight E5. This is all mainline stuff. I think bishop D6 and bishop C5 are both possible. They're going to be met by D4. Actually, bishop C5 can't be met by D4. That's the point of bishop C5. So I think that's called the Steiner variation, if I remember from my book. I'm again pulling from Victor Bologan's Black Weapons book. Okay, so you can see White's got his extra pawn, but I have a lead in development. I have more control over the center. And my bishops are both quite free to roam. Okay, he castles into it. Queen D6 is one idea here. And he has to move the knight. Queen D6 also watches over the C6 pawn. It looks like knight at G4 is the only move after Queen D6. Probably I should castle first. I'm not convinced about that. Let's do it, just to save some time. We know we need a castle. C3 is a common move here. Yep, now he's threatening B4. He also wants to he wants to play D4 possibly as well. But this critically takes away his C3 square for his knight. Oh, if I go queen d6, the knight can come to c4, but I would love to trade off my knight for his. My knight on the edge for his centralized knight, his most active piece. Queen e7 is a bit more flexible. Queen e7, and then the bishop might come to d6. But queen e7, and there's still b5, b4. I'm going to go queen d6. Just to watch over that c6 pawn. d4 is the likely response. Yeah, my knight on a5 often comes back to b7. d4 is really the critical response here, and I have to figure out whether I want to take on d3 en passant or not. It's either that or bishop to b6. And if I do take en passant, he needs to take with his knight, in which case I'll probably go bishop to b6 anyway. That's probably better, because his knight is not so centralized. Yeah, my bishop is still on an open diagonal at least. That e4 pawn is such a strength here, though. Oh, let's do it. Now bishop to b6. I don't see another move that makes much sense. Knight to c4 was maybe possible. Now he's got bishop f4 ideas. Okay. Wanting to trade queens. His knight looks misplaced on b4 though. Queen e5 looks strong. Queen e5, rook e1, and then I've got rook e8, disallowing, sort of pinning that bishop. I also keep ideas of bishop to c7 in mind, or mate threats on h2. So let's do this. Okay, we got 15 moves in by 10 minutes, almost 11 minutes left on our clock. A little down on time, but we're a very reasonable position time-wise in general. I might consider a move like knight d5. I don't see a reason to trade off his knight on b4, though. Candidate moves for white. Rook e8. Okay. He's bringing his knight to f3 to try to chase my queen some more. That would also guard h2. I wonder if my idea of rook. Where's my light squared bishop want to go? Okay, I still like the idea of rook to e8. That's a natural square for my rook, and I'm making a threat against his bishop here. So he can't go knight f3 immediately. Maybe it's C. Jaffet Jr. Looks like they're from Brazil. I'd be happy to see bishop f3. Bishop d3 would also be welcome. If he goes rook e1, which I think is likely, then I can maybe go bishop, queen to c5, hitting f2 twice, and he'd have to come back to f1 as far as I can see. I can't see another defense for that. No, he'd have knight d3. He'd have knight d3. Of course I could hit f2 from f4 or f5 instead. So rook e1. Oh, I could even think about bishop taking immediately. That's definitely the most forcing continuation. Then I could take on h2 and I'd have 2 pawns for that piece and a dangerous looking attack. Okay, he goes bishop to d3. I don't think this is good. Partly because I have bishop g4, getting my bishop out with tempo. What's the idea with bishop g3? Oh man, c5 even looks appealing here. Just putting the real squeeze on his knight. Bishop g4, and then if he runs to c2 with his queen, c5 just wins a piece, it looks like. He can't block with f3. He can't move his queen to the e file because I have control over that. So bishop g4 just looks winning here. Let's make sure. Bishop g4. There's no f3. Queen e2, queen e1, there's none of that. No queen b3. There is queen a4. Queen a4. That queen is so far from the action now. And then he would be threatening c6. But I could make a threat on his bishop and cover c6 by going queen back to d6 here. Bishop g4. I've also got bishop c7 ideas immediately. And if he tries to play f4, I've got e3, queen e3 check. Queen e3 check. That doesn't quite win the knight, does it? Okay, the immediate c5, knight c2 is his only option. No, he's got a6, knight a6. But if knight a6, that rules out bishop c7. Okay. I'm liking the look of bishop g4. It also allows me to get another rook in the game. That could be quite powerful. Am I missing another kind of win with, say maybe c5? c5, knight a6. That knight's out of the game. Then bishop g4. Then the queen could go to c2. Let's go bishop g4. That leaves open the possibility of bishop c7. And I'm going to try to create some weaknesses in his castle position on, with say g3, or provoking h3 or g3. Okay, I hadn't considered this. Short-sighted of me not to consider this. He's not really threatening to take, is he? Queen h5 looks good. Just looks good in general. Let's go queen h5. If he goes bishop e7, I might think about taking, sacking the exchange there. It's probably not that good. If he goes bishop, yeah. Bishop e7. I've got bishop c6 ideas, so I don't think this can be too bad. So queen h5, bishop e7, bishop c7 makes a pretty good threat. So let's go rook a to d8 after bishop e2. Keep saying e7. So bishop e2, rook a to d8. I just really like the looks of things here. Every piece of mine is doing something useful. He does have bishop f4. If he goes bishop f4, I might just trade on f3 and go for an active queenless middle game. He does go bishop f4. Rook a to d8 is still good. It's got to be good. It makes a subtle threat, actually. So yeah, I've just got all sorts of activity here. If he goes, say, h3, I just take on f3, and then if queen takes, I go queen takes, and then after g takes f3, I've got c5, and then after his knight moves, I just take on d3 and I win a piece. I win that bishop. Now he can't play bishop to e2. Okay, I think this also wins me a piece, but there's back rank concerns. No, my knight covers e8. Okay, look, rook takes d1, check, queen has to take, then c5, wins a piece, knight has to move, and then I grab the bishop. I could also insert some capture on f3 after that. Actually, that might be my best bet. Fortunately, my bishop here protects this rook. Otherwise, he'd have these tactics of bishop h7 check and winning that rook with the queen in certain lines. I've also got bishop f2 here. No, that doesn't amount to anything. Okay, we're going to take. He has to take with his queen. And then the bishop is not sufficiently defended. So here comes c5. There's also bishop takes f3. Oof. Does that win a piece too? Bishop takes f3, g takes f3, queen takes f3. I'm hitting both bishops. I'm only looking to win the exchange on that, on d3. But he could play queen d2. But then c5 is going to win material anyway, right? That really opens up his king. Keeps the initiative. Everything of mine is protected. I don't see a way for him to wriggle out of this with a tactic. Bishop takes f3, g takes f3, queen takes f3. Queen d2. c4. Sorry, c5. Yeah, let's do this. Also have some checks I can give here. Queen d2 seems like the most likely follow-up for him. Yeah, fortunately my knight on f6 really does a lot of work here. He can't play queen e4, which would ruin this whole idea. The knight also threatens to jump into g4 to put more pressure on f2. Okay, he defends that way. So I could grab 2 pieces for the rook right now, keep my other bishop active, or I could just knock the knight away and win a piece cleanly. Does that win a piece cleanly? No, he has bishop e2. And after bishop e2, I don't have a check. So I better take... Okay, maybe I missed my chance to win a piece earlier. He's got bishop e2. Queen e4. Queen e4. This is simpler. We better go for it. So we have 2 knights for a rook. Probably want to keep the queens on the board. F5 seems like a reasonable place for the queen. Maybe F3 was better. Really low on time. Yeah, I think keeping the queens on is important here. So if he goes queen d4, oof, queen e5, I'm sorry, queen e5. All right. This threatens to play rook. Yeah, rook into e7, d7. No, not as long as my knight's there. That's not a threat. I want to get my knight going. Knight to c4. These minor pieces cover a lot of crucial squares, which is nice. Okay. Need to play quickly here. He doesn't have any checks on the back rank. I've got ideas of, say, let's say rook d2, knight d3. There's quite a bit of pressure on f2. And I could ramp up that pressure with knight g4, assuming that's tactically safe. Could also go knight. No. Knight e1 is overruled by the queen. Okay, let's go with this. Gain back a little bit of time. If nothing else, I can get my knight to c5 here, and then to d6, and it's much improved. e6, I'm sorry. Can I go knight? Is knight c1 worth anything here? No, probably not. Okay. Our knight is a very strong piece on e6. It would free up our bishop from guarding d8. An endgame is still good for me, but two knights versus a rook, when there's fewer pieces on the board, especially when the queens are off the board, a knight versus a rook, two knights against a rook is not nearly as good. The rook even can have the advantage in some cases. The knights will be tricky, and I might have an advantage in a practical sense, but yeah, knight to d6 could lead to knight to g5 into f3 with a check and starting to really make white's king position look iffy. It's another reason I want to keep my queens on the board, not only to coordinate with my knights, but also his king is a lot less safe than mine. I've got possible checks on b1 should I need them. That doesn't seem to do much. I've also got knight e4 here. That would be very strong. Either knight could come to b4, to e4. Probably want my c5 knight to get out of the bishop's way to do that. Yeah, okay. I like how this is looking. He can't cover... Can he cover e4? Maybe with rook to d4? That doesn't look much good, because... Okay. He does have f2 covered a lot of times, but I think it would be good for me to take off that defensive bishop. So yeah, let's go for this. I'm also hitting the c3 pawn. Feels good to activate that knight. Where's that rook going? Oh. The queen. Well, I can still take on g3. And you can't trade queens immediately. Let's do that, since there's very little time left. If he goes for the queen trade right now, I just end up winning a piece. Oh, this looks risky, but I like the looks of it. Hits the rook and f2. The bishop is no longer guarding f2. He still has no checks. And if he goes, well, he can't go f3. That bishop is a real shark on that king's diagonal. Okay, I can simplify here and have a pawn up ending, it appears. I'm going to go for that. Yeah, in the interests of time. Now, what's the best way to do this? I think keeping those pawns back and getting my king moving. I think. It might have been a mistake. I was thinking f4. But we got our strategy. I can make a passer all on my own if we just get our kings over to the queen side. Okay, now f5. I should say f5 rather than f4. f5 looks quite good. Okay, this looks like it could end up with, he'll have one pass pawn. After some trades, I will have a couple of pass pawns over here that I should be able to eke out a win with. What's the best way to handle this queenside situation? a6. No, let's just get moving over here. My plan is very simple. Okay. Keep his king out of the position. There's no immediate danger yet. I can continue pushing. Okay, I take, he has to take, and then I've got king d6. Now, if I push h4, he cannot take my f-pawn. Actually, this keeps him out of the square. Yeah, this sets up a nice thematic illustrative pawn formation where he won't be able to capture either of my pawns. He has to go king f4 now, and I can just sit tight because my pawns form a little wall in between each other on these squares. If he takes, my pawn runs. And if he tries to dance his way around to take this pawn, in the meantime, I can set this pawn up as the more advanced one. So if he gets his king to b7, he gets his king to, okay, I'm just going to take this pawn. If he tries to get his king to b2, I'll play c5. Sorry, I get all the coordinates mixed up in the end game. So yeah, I just approach with my king, and if he goes, king to g2, then I could probably move my king in. I like to calculate this line, king here, king there. Let's just, getting too fancy here. But what I can do instead is this little trick, which will mean whichever one he steps in front of, I march the other one. Well, I move it forward one square, and once again we have this wall set up, right? Now at this point, could I do the same? Would that be an instructive win here? Yeah, they can actually force promotion. So let's do this. Yeah, and this will actually lead to I'm just checking to make sure there's not going to be stalemates. But no, that's fine. Okay. Very tense game there. A lot of time trouble. For his rating, CJ, I believe, my opponent played very well. Coming down, making me go into a king and pawn ending. A lot of times the difference between players, one who's stronger than another, comes down to just knowing when an ending is going to be winning, right? So I had a pretty good idea. I wasn't certain, but when I simplified into that pawn ending, I had a pretty good idea it was going to be winning, based on what I know from these kind of pawn mechanics. And they were played out in the game, right? He was able to get one passed pawn, which isn't a problem for my king to deal with. But I was able to get two passed pawns, and even though they're not connected, I had those two passed pawns, one file apart, can protect each other from a lone king via the way that was demonstrated in the game. So, thank you for the game. Let's analyze. All right, I'm a huge fan of the two knights defense. It's one of my favorite openings. Here we go. And this is all book, this stuff. So knight g5. The one thing that the two knights defense really allows, if there's a weak point in bringing both these knights out so early, is that I cannot defend f7 another time, other than to sacrifice this pawn. It's a good pawn sacrifice, however, because it is a developing move, and it gives me a lot of initiative and freedom for my pieces. So there's other moves here that I like to play sometimes. Knight to d4 is a personal favorite, called the Fritz variation. b5 is even a move here, if you believe that. That's the Ulvestad variation. But this is the main line of the two knights, knight to a5. And, I mean, there's lots of... This is a very sound opening. There's lots of ways for black to play it right, actually. Bishop d7 is a good move here as well. But c6 is the main move. I think there's even lines where you can capture on c6 with a knight. Just down a pawn, and just arguing that white's pieces are kind of misplaced. But the main line is the more forcing c takes. There's lines where black sacrifices two pawns in the two knights defense. It's quite an aggressive gambit. Queen f3 here is one of those lines, and a lot of times the idea is just to let that c6 pawn go and develop your dark square bishop and get closer to castling. Lots of fun, lots of pawn sacrifices to be had in the two knights. Bishop e7 is one of the main lines, although I think bishop d3, oddly enough, has become just as popular. So h6 is a book move. Let's see how far I was able to keep the book going. e4, knight e5, bishop c5, which the computer likes best. c3, okay, castling, c3 is good. It says d3 is best. So it likes rook to e8 here, interestingly. Gaining some time on the knight. Rook to e8. Let's see. Queen d6 is a mistake. Okay. So d4, e takes d3, knight takes d3, bishop e6. This is what happened in the game. But yeah, that's the line with bishop f4. So going ahead here, if white had played bishop f4 here, he would have kept an advantage. Actually, knight a3 is also good. Threatening a fork on c4. Oh. But the line that's presented back here, queen d6 is a mistake because d4, e takes en passant, knight takes, bishop slides back. I suppose you could leave the bishop there and move the knight instead. But then you got bishop f4 if you're following me. So queen has to move again. White's solving his development problems with tempo, and his extra pawn is going to count for a lot more in that case. Bishop d6 was the best. Okay, yes, I'm remembering this from the chessable lessons I recently had. So bishop d6, which is silly looking because I just played bishop to c5. But the point is, he's put a pawn on c3, and that means his knight can't naturally develop to c3. So the computer likes bishop d6, d4, e takes d3, and knight takes d3. So it's similar to the game, but my bishop is on d6 and my queen hasn't moved. And then rook to e8. So the idea is you've misplaced white's pawn. He's not benefited by his pawn being on c3, and it makes d3 kind of a weakness long term, and it means his knight can't come out here to c3. What are some other book moves here? Do we have access to that? Openings, there we go. Queen c7 and bishop d6 are the two moves that have been played in the games in the database. Queen c7, the computer says, is best. Okay, so there's two clear good moves here. Queen c7 develops the queen. And let's see, yeah, d4, take en passant, knight takes d3. We've saved ourselves some time by white not being able to chase our pieces around. So okay, I'll have to retain that for the opening. I think I like queen c7, just because it develops another piece. But bishop d6 gets out of that threat of b4 as well. So I'll just remember one of those two moves in the future. Probably this bishop d6, this idea. Once he plays c3, okay, bishop goes to d6, and his knight has an awkward time developing. Okay, queen d6 is a mistake. We made these moves, and then white made another mistake. Now it likes queen c7. Queen e5, though, is best. That's good. Don't trade the queens when you're down a pawn. Basic logic there. I wanted to go back to knight d3, chasing my queen, but then I go to f5. Okay. Knight d2 is okay as well. Rook e8. Bishop d3 is a mistake. And a big mistake. -2. So bishop g4. Knight f3, queen h5. I missed something here. I have an over a pawn advantage. h3. Now that's an inaccuracy. Bishop f4. c5 right away. c5 right away. Makes sense. That's an inaccuracy. But not too bad. I mean, I still have a big advantage. c5 is best. Let's look at this line. I mean, one of the reasons I was hesitant to play c5 was I was worried about shutting down that nice diagonal my bishop is on, but it likes h3 here. It's just giving up a piece. h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes, and then just taking on b4. Why can't it try to save the piece, say with knight c2? Now rook a to d8, and we're threatening. Because the queen can't come to c2 now, we are threatening, and she can't come anywhere where she'll still defend this bishop. So we're going to play c4, and apparently there's just very little that can be done about that. b3, does that stop the idea of c4? Bishop takes f3. Okay, we're really going to try to hang on to this bishop. G takes f3, now c4, b takes c4, knight takes c4, now we're threatening a fork here. So rook to stop the fork, knight d5. Knight d5 hits the bishop, bishop g3. Oh, and we've got this fork, knight takes c3. That is a big line to try to see. Big line. But it shows you how those active black pieces definitely outweigh that pawn deficit. Because now he's regained the pawn, and we're going to win the exchange. Actually, bishop takes c4 is the best move. That's crazy. Okay. Rook e1 is a mistake. Rook takes, queen takes, and then probably c5 here. Okay, bishop takes. I'm going to bust up those pawns. And now c5. I can always take on f3 later. So it's a mistake, but it's still a game-winning mistake. The best kind of mistake. But I had an easier win with g takes f3. I'm sorry. With c5 here. Let's look at it. c5, this is what and I had seen this too. It likes knight to d5. Giving up the knight rather than the bishop. That makes some sense. Knight takes d5, and then queen takes d5. Bishop back to f1 to try to cover the king. Queen takes f3. We've regained our pawn and gone up a piece. Very simple, very winning continuation. Everything's safe, everything's protected, except the queen, who's very aggressively posted. Okay, instead I went queen f3, regaining the pawn and keeping my threats. Yeah, bishop g3 is the best move here, apparently. I thought queen... Yeah, bishop g3. I'm threatening to take this bishop. That's not as... I'm threatening to take the f4 bishop, and that is a bigger threat than winning this exchange, so to speak. So, bishop g3. Rook takes d3 is best. Yeah, I was glad that I saw white had this intermediate move, saving the bishop and attacking my queen. Queen e4, and then still knight to d3. Oh, it kind of transposes. But now my pawn is on c4. So my bishop is a little less happy. So just taking immediately is better. So I keep my bishop and the pressure on that f2 pawn and G1 to A7 diagonal, that shark bishop. Okay, I should have gone back to F3. Yeah, that should have presented itself more clearly to me. I didn't consider that. I looked at F5 for some reason. F3 is more aggressive, and yeah, prevents him from trying to trade off the queens. Queen F5 is a mistake, but still a game-winning mistake. Queen E7 is a blunder. Bishop takes F2. Oof. This is serious stuff here. Bishop takes F2. Bishop takes F2. Queen G4 check. King F1. Queen takes D1. Oh, I had that fork to win the exchange and a pawn. I'll play it out here. Now we are just up a piece. And a pawn, in fact. So, missed that tactic. This happens when you get in time trouble. B3 is a mistake. I still got bishop takes F2. In this case, yeah, because when I win, difficult to see, because when I win, I have to know that when I win that rook, I will be checking the king no matter where he goes, or if bishop blocks. So I'll have time to save my knight after all that. So again, I made a lot of game-winning mistakes in this game. Rook D2 is best. Knight D3. Queen E2 is best. Knight C5 is best. B4 is not so good. And Knight C to E4 is best. Does White have any better defenses? King G2, at least getting rid of the pin. Queen D3 is inaccurate. The better move was Rook to D3. Sure. Knight D5 is his best move here. Just getting those knights really into position. Knight takes G3 is a blunder, but a game-winning blunder. See, I don't agree with calling a move like that a blunder. I had a clear idea, and I knew I had a winning endgame, more or less. I had a good idea that I'd have a winning endgame. It likes H takes G3. Knight E4 is a blunder. Okay, this does allow black a draw. Queen H3 is best. I guess that's the idea there, is just threatening Knight G4. Okay, I can see that. But I was very low on time, and I was leery of this move, but I was just trying to pile up the pressure on F2. And White blundered in return. Queen F3. Well, I could have gone for Knight takes G3 here, just grabbing another pawn. Queen F3. Queen F3 releases the pin. Let's see what White's best move was. Why Knight E4 was a blunder. Where's the draw? Rook to E2. Bishop takes F2. King to G2. Bishop takes G3. Queen takes E4. Huh. Well, we're up 2 pawns. We got 3 monster pawns on the king side. But this is reading out as a draw. Queen takes E4 is a mistake. Computer likes White a lot better in this ending. Bishop D6, probably because there's no way to stop the rook from getting to the second rank. And chowing down on some of our pawns. So, Queen G5. King F3, F5. Wow. Queen check, King H7, Rook G2, F4. Okay. White had a chance to make it much more interesting, in other words. Queen C2 is a blunder, and now Queen F3 would have been a stronger move for me. I made another game-winning mistake, a game-winning blunder. That's 2 game-winning blunders I made. Bishop takes F2, pretty much forcing all this. Does he have any other? About King G2, Queen G5. Takes F2, Queen G3. Yeah, and that gets us an even better king and pawn ending. Bishop takes F2, Rook takes F2, Queen takes F2. Right. And the computer evaluates this as +1, or, you know, a 1 pawn advantage approximately for black. I am up 1 pawn, but in a king and pawn ending like this, the numbers aren't as important. The numerical evaluations aren't as important as the qualitative outcomes. And I thought, I've got 90% chance to win this game. And also, this is a simple game. So practically speaking, I don't think these were mistakes. These game-winning blunders, they simplified the game and allowed me to go into technical mode in an endgame where I was able to use my endgame knowledge to win pretty simply and add time to my clock. So I was curious about King to F8 here. H5 is best. Yeah, just get those pawns rolling. Give that king something to chase down. Fix that G pawn where it is too. But this is all still good, and you'll see the evaluations just continue to gradually tick up. C4 is an inaccuracy. A4 would be better. He needs to try to make. I don't know. I'm not sure I believe the computer about that being an inaccuracy. Might not matter. F5 is a mistake. C5 check is best. Oh, I see. That does make sense. So this is why C4 is an inaccuracy, because now the king can't step on C4. So I can go here, and this drops a pawn, but now my king is just blockading all these pawns. And it's just a matter of running on the king side with my pawns. But as I push these pawns on the king side to try to make a passer, if he chases me down, then I simply start gobbling up his pawns, and I have this. I'll be able to gobble up that pawn as well and push it. So if I force a pawn trade over here, and say I just got my my F pawn, which I can leave behind, his king comes and cleans up this pawn over here, maybe a passed A pawn I was able to make, H pawn I was able to make, and in the meantime I will have gobbled up both of these and be on my way to gobbling up this one, and by the time he gets to chowing down on this, I'm pushing this this A pawn for the win. So typical, outside pass pawn is one of the most important pawn ending ideas, and this is a nice way to set that up to simplify things. It wasn't needed, and I found other way to win. F5, my idea was to take away the E4 square, and this actually worked out in the game. G5. Now when he does play C5, I can keep his king out for some time. And this is critical here. If I get panicked about these pawns and slide my king back, say to D7, he can bring his king in, or maybe more accurately, it would be to bring his king to E5, and then I can push here, and I've got an outside passer, but I don't have my pawn advantage anymore. So yeah, and actually I might have a tough time dealing with these pawns without just drawing the game. So that's why it was important that I found a way to keep pushing and get myself one move closer to making a queen. And you'll see that, yeah, I have a -2 advantage now at this point. So b6 is one attempt. If he plays c6, I can just go king d6. But b6, I simply take, and then he doesn't have anything better than taking, and king d6. I'm in the square. And his king has no, and even right now, his king has no way of getting closer to my pawns. He can't play to e5, which is where he really wants to go. So he plays b7, and then he can get to e5. But by now, I can push this pawn. And this was the point of h5. He takes, and he can't take my f pawn. Yeah, and this, I think, was a nice way to illustrate this principle of these two pawns. They can't necessarily promote on their own, because he just, as long as his king can stay put. So for instance, when I do this again, he doesn't have to come. Let's go back up. I want to illustrate something. Okay, he tries to catch one of these pawns. He plays to c6. a6 would be similar. But let's say instead he could play here. I think I've got the same principle at play. Yeah, so these pawns, if my king isn't even in this game, let's say my king is irrelevant or he's stuck for some reason, these pawns should be able to simply promote on their own, even though they're not connected. So it's a useful, really useful thing to know if you go into an ending like this, that those two pawns 2 files apart can still protect each other from a king if as long as they're both passed and they have the threat of promoting. He can never get to a place where he can capture one of them safely. So having known that helps me to figure out that this king and pawn ending would be winning. Because I thought if we trade everything off and I end up with 2 passers over here and my king's not even, in a neighborhood to help them, they can help themselves. You do need to know that once he goes to g2 here, I do have to push this other pawn. Maybe my king can get close enough. Let's say he can't. Let's say he's here. Now king here. My king is still close enough to win with this f pawn, but let's say here. That draws. But now the pawns can't protect each other, right? Because the king can safely take and still stay in the square. So, little endgame lesson here at the end. I think this is a really useful thing to know. I read it in a book once, and I've seen it in multiple games. You can apply this knowledge in the endgame in chess. So another useful king and pawn ending. Last time we saw the value in the French defense a couple of games ago, we saw the value of a protected pass pawn. It was a relatively easy win. And now you see the value of 2 pass pawns, 1 file apart, and how they can indirectly protect each other. All right. Let's just look at the game report real quick. All right, I had 97.1 accuracy. Very happy about this. Lots of best moves, lots of book moves. 5 mistakes, 4 blunders, and 1 inaccuracy. But even those blunders, most of the time, were not. They were game-winning blunders. I made it a little more. I lowered the computer evaluation, but it might have been a simpler way for me to win. So I don't count those as blunders. I'm very happy with how I played here. And again, I was impressed with my opponent's play as well for his rating. So thanks for watching, folks. I hope you stay feisty. I'll see you next time.